Hello and a very good evening, and this is our usual session about the lighter side of kind of what's going on in the world, and updating you on everything that's been going on with us in the world, and talking about the big picture as well. But we start tonight with a bit of kind of sad and perhaps somewhat unexpected news, because the breaking story in the news right now appears to be that despite the fact that up until moments ago, the messages coming out of government were that Boris Johnson was in good spirits, but remained in hospital with symptoms. There have been developments on this story in the last few minutes, really, which we'd like to share with you now, in that the Prime Minister has been taken into intensive care, according to reports on multiple news agencies, including the BBC and The Guardian. Just short of an hour and a half ago, Boris Johnson, his medical team made this decision. A very good evening to you, Kevin, and hello, Paul. We're just leading today with the news that Boris Johnson has been moved into intensive care. Good evening to you, Andrew. A little bit of less good news to start with today. The Prime Minister has been moved into intensive care after his condition in hospital worsened. He's conscious, but has been moved as a precaution in case he needs a ventilator, and that's just about all the information that we have on that story at the moment. But we will keep looking at it. A spokesman for Number 10 Downing Street said since Sunday evening the Prime Minister has been under the care of doctors at St Thomas's Hospital in London after being admitted with persistent. Apologies for the lack of sound on today's live. Thank you for joining us, and we'll recap. A very good evening to Kevin, to Paul, and to Andrew. This should be coming through loud and clear now, hopefully. And today we lead with the very sad news, which has broken within the last few minutes, about the Prime Minister. All through the day, we were having stories that he was in good spirits, but was remaining in hospital for tests. I hope you can hear us now. But within the last few minutes, the story has broken. A very good evening, Anita. Thank you for joining us this evening. Before we get on to the usual sort of happy stories, the breaking news this evening is that Kevin says he still can't hear what I'm saying. I think we'll stop the broadcast and oh yes, it's good. You can hear us now. The Guardian led 15 minutes ago, saying that the decision was made by Boris Johnson's medical team after his condition worsened over the course of today, to move him into intensive care. He's understood to be conscious, but he's been moved to intensive care as a precaution in case he needs a ventilator. And then ITV reports that a spokesman for Number 10 said that since Sunday evening, the Prime Minister has been under the care of doctors at St Thomas's Hospital in London after being admitted with persistent symptoms of coronavirus. Over the course of this afternoon, that is Monday afternoon, the condition of Mr Johnson has worsened, and on the advice of his medical team, he has been moved to ICU at the hospital. The Prime Minister has asked the Foreign Secretary Dominic Raab, who is the first Secretary of State, to deputise for him where necessary. The Prime Minister is receiving excellent care and thanks all NHS staff for their hard work and dedication. It doesn't particularly matter how we voted on Brexit. It doesn't particularly matter how we feel about sunbathing over the weekend or not. This is serious stuff, and along with all the others who put themselves in the front line, our leaders have been working very hard and very long hours to bring this under control. Good evening, Corinna. Good evening, David, and hello, Will. We're just opening today with the sad news that the Prime Minister has been moved into intensive care. He's still conscious at the moment, but but he's coming to the end of day 10 of coronavirus. It's in the second week of that virus that it gets nasty, and it would appear that this has happened in his case. So regardless of our political persuasions, because that's rather irrelevant, a good evening to you, Andy. We hope that the Prime Minister and indeed everybody else who's currently suffering from this virus and who's been admitted to hospital will make a full and speedy recovery. And the first bit of actual good news that we have today is that the numbers are continuing to fall. I'm going to go back here to my chunky old computer, which normally lives out of camera shot, but this is the one where I do all my calculations to track the spread of this outbreak, which I've done from the first day, actually, because it's we're looking at important stuff here, the news again today, it's about 4 or 5 o'clock in the afternoon that they release the figures on this virus. The lockdown appears to be working, and all the projections for that appear to be on track. If we rewind to Tuesday of last week, and that's just 6 days ago, the overnight growth of this virus, it nearly doubled the number of deaths. It went up by 112% in one night. By Wednesday of last week, it was down to 48%. Then on Friday of last week, the increase in the number of deaths was just 20%, and then it started going negative over the weekend. We saw a 12% drop in the number of deaths on Sunday, and we've seen a 29% drop in the number of deaths in coronavirus. That is as in the figures that have come out today. So our figures today are only slightly higher, a couple higher than they were a week ago, and this is not the exponential growth that we would expect with this kind of virus. So everybody is staying at home, everybody is being sensible, and together we're going to beat this horrible, nasty little lurgy. No question about that. Kevin says that he's read that the immune system tries to recover in the first 10 days of this virus, but of course our immune system doesn't really recognise this football thing with little spikes floating around. A very good evening to you. A very good evening, Karen and Thomas. Thank you for joining us this evening. So it's because of the inability of our immune system to recognise this virus, because it's a totally new thing. We're working on the antidotes for this. We're working on medicines that will work on this. There are 300 clinical trials going on. We're working on loads and loads of vaccines. One country is developing 6 vaccines simultaneously. Others say that they'll have something ready to go within months. So we are seeing good news there. But in the meantime, a very good evening to Bharat. Thank you for joining us this evening. In the meantime, we're seeing a plunge in those numbers because we're all staying at home, we're all being sensible. My daily exercise consists on stepping out of my front door, going down the garden, stepping onto the pavement, seeing nobody in the entire street, and going back in again. And that's about all I've been doing for the last 10 days or so, and that's sort of working. And when the postman pushes things through the envelope, I disinfect them and all that kind of thing. And so sensible precautions will keep us all safe and sound. Good evening, Anita. Thank you for joining us this evening. We're being sensible here, aren't we? And,
Yes.
and it's not a preferred kind of choice, but there are people who've had far worse lockdowns in history who've kind of really been suffering at the same time as not being able to open their doors. And the only thing we're really not able to do is open our doors. Good evening, David. Thank you for joining us this evening. You join us for all the sort of happy corona news, but I am sad to report, as I did at the beginning, that Boris Johnson has been moved into intensive care this evening after his condition worsened today. So regardless of our political persuasions, we wish him well, and in fact MPs from all sides of the House of Commons have been so doing. So let us move on to the normal stuff that we do. We'll move on to the slim laptop now, which is the sort of nice looking one. So we've got the numbers coming down, and let's see some positive stuff that's been going on around the UK, and apparently video games have been increasing in popularity, and a lot of people are spending the lockdown. Very good evening to you, Brendan. Thank you for joining us, and also Lavina. What are people doing during this lockdown? People are playing all sorts of video games. Most of them reasonably tasteful, but there's been one called Plague hanging around at the top of the phone game charts for a while for people with a sort of dark sense of humour, I guess. But you know, it doesn't matter what games you're playing on the old computer. By not going out, you're not spreading the germs. And there are these multiplayer games, aren't there, where you can play with your mates anyway and hook up in sort of near real time. So you know, that's it's all good news. There's an art gallery apparently in Barnsley, and this piece of news comes from the Daily Telegraph, which has turned its paintings into online jigsaws. If I went into an art gallery with one of those Black and Decker jigsaws, other brands are available, and started doing this for real, I'd be in trouble. But in the virtual world, you can get away with stuff, can't you? And they've got people all around the globe who are competing to complete these jigsaws, and that's quite nice, really. And that's a very nice story. Good evening to Sandy. Thank you for joining us. We're looking at the good news surrounding the coronavirus lockdown that we're currently in the middle of. I mentioned how every single day for the last 6 days, the numbers the increase in the number of deaths has been falling, which is fabulous news, and it's faster than I expected it to happen, because I'm a spreadsheet geek, and I've been putting these numbers into my spreadsheet every day. So since Tuesday of last week, day on day on day, the rate of increase in this has been falling. So we are beating this. This lockdown will soon be over. It's possible that we'll still have to do the social distancing thing, but you know, we'll be able to go to work and go about our daily lives, not travel on many buses, since they don't seem to be disinfecting them according to reports, which is disgraceful. And hello, Michael, thank you for joining us this evening. Now, there's a national camp out, but obviously we can't all do it in Hyde Park because that would be closed. Something that happened over the weekend, we saw increasingly police forces, quite rightly, coming to look at what people were getting up to in parks and telling them to sort of move along, because you know, you can do your 20-minute daily jog or something, but there's absolutely no justification for sort of getting together and having a barbie or something in the middle of the park. So absolutely spot on. Yeah. But there's a national camp out which is taking place in people's tents and camper vans in their gardens. It's for charity. It's raised £80,000 so far for the NHS, and the fellow who started this thing, and all these things, they spread through social media. A very good evening to you, Brian. Thank you for joining us. We're talking about a national camp out that this fella called Ian Alcorn started, hoping to raise £100, and so people are sleeping in tents in their gardens and in their camper vans and that kind of thing. He's raised £80,000 so far for these wonderful people in the NHS, who, if you missed the story at the beginning, are currently, and a very good evening to you, Maggie. I'll be repeating this throughout today, in case for people who just joined us. If you haven't heard, the Prime Minister today, just now, has been, within the last 2 hours, has been moved into intensive care. So his very life is now in the hands of our NHS heroes, who are doing all that they can to save everybody who's in the firing line. And the death rates are falling. They're falling day on day, because the experts who Neil Ferguson, Professor Neil Ferguson, who came up with this terrific idea, everybody stay at home, and then you know, if we're not coughing on each other, how the heck can the virus spread? And it might seem obvious, but you know, that's what we all need to do right now.
The numbers are definitely coming down according to the predictions, which at the beginning, I must say, when you first started working on your spreadsheet, I thought that's too no, that's too negative, that's not going to happen, and it is happening now. Even the Prime Minister, we can see
it's a terrible tragedy to see people hit with this thing, and the best thing we can possibly do is to all stick together and all work together and stay at home and kind of and lick it. And that's brought down, I mean, you know, if we'd all carried on doing our sort of daily stuff and just pretending it didn't happen, 500,000 people would have died. By having a sort of separating policy of social isolation thing, that reduces it to 250,000. Then by in terms of this lockdown, that gets it straight down to the sort of 40,000 mark. And then the optimistic prediction, which it looks like we're going to hit now, is that we won't, I mean, any death is senseless and tragic, but it looks like we won't lose more than 20,000 people all in, which is from this very nasty, very vicious thing. Good evening to you, Adrian and Lee. Thank you for joining us this evening. We're trying to lift everybody's spirits and look at all the good stories in the news that are going on, because there are plenty of them, and everybody is rising to this challenge. And as a nation and as a planet altogether, as Homo sapiens, we're all working together all around the world, regardless of our sort of politics, our borders, or anything like that, to lick this horrible, nasty thing that we want to stamp out.
I know it is difficult. It is difficult because, I mean, we are in day, 13 now?
This is day 14.
Day 14 of the lockdown. And it's just a matter of that we sometimes, as we are all different, we cope in different ways. So looking at the positives is a very good way of really changing the theme of whatever somber happenings are going through. Some people work differently and cope differently, but the best thing we can do is to cooperate with each other and really maintain into a perspective that we are all in this together.
Absolutely. And another bit of good news from that superstar, Professor Neil Ferguson. This has been the first day where admittances to hospital have actually reduced day on day. Fewer people admitted today into hospital than yesterday. So you know, it's all extremely good. And then there are some children who are going to, because the children of key workers, a number of schools are still opening up in order to provide education for them, so that mum and dad can go to hospital, so that mum and dad can service the supermarket, so that mum and dad can do all those things that are keeping the country running, the power stations, the things without which everything would just sort of grind to a halt, really. And so there's Wigan's St John, this is the Daily Telegraph again, Wigan's St John Fisher Catholic High School. The kids there have been making face shields for the NHS using tutorials that they found on YouTube. How inspiring is that? And the school has even donated, and this is so sweet, their science goggles to the hospital.
Oh, that's brilliant.
In Israel, a very influential group of rabbis have suggested that worshippers would share their Passover with their extended family and friends, as is the custom, but that they would do it over Zoom calls. And I haven't been sharing Passover meals with people, but I've been doing Zoom calls all day and all week long, and it's just so wonderful to stay in touch with people using technology that enables us to do stuff that would have not been thought possible. It wouldn't have been thought possible even a decade ago. We didn't have this in the SARS outbreak. We didn't have this. We didn't have this possibility. Then this sounds like a punchline for a joke, but did you hear about the virtual mountaineer?
No.
Well, there's this fella called Charlie, who is Charlie Wardle. He's virtually hiking 20 of Britain's highest mountain peaks in 20 days using his stairs. Now that's just a wonderful thing.
Wow.
So he had planned to do this in real life and to climb 20 mountains to raise money for charity before the lockdown, but he's brought the challenge indoors. I think I could participate in that, but I wouldn't do Ben Nevis. I'd just do the hill at the end of the road, by going up and down the stairs 3 times. But it's a very nice.
I do fancy that challenge, actually.
It's a nice gesture. Good evening, Peter. Thank you for joining us this evening. We're talking about the good news, the uplifting, positive stories that have come out of this coronavirus crisis, and there's you can't make some of this up. So France's former French Olympic pole vault champion is staging an international home containment competition where he's jumping but he's doing it at home. I don't know how on earth you could reach 5.61 meters jumping at home. He is a former champion. His name is René Lavillenie. But I'm not sure how you do this at home.
Could be in his garden.
But oh, maybe. Now there's a thing, because I was thinking of how we could do this on the stairs. But
No.
I think the stair we'll stick with climbing Ben Nevis on our stairs, and we'll
Yes,
do
I think so.
the pole vault in the garden. But try not to go over the fence to next door, because then we'd contaminate them with all our germs. So we can't do that. Or get all of theirs. So that would be completely out of the question. Completely out of the question. And then Random House, the publisher, are sending some free books to some of the communities who are locked down the most, which is fabulous. And yeah, so there's good stuff going on. There's good stuff going on.
Keeping positive.
Have we got space for some more? We possibly do. Right. So let's find a few more things. Obviously, as we mentioned before, the numbers are on the whole peaking with this thing. Italy has reported its lowest daily number of new cases in 2 weeks. So I think this staying at home thing, and learn chess, or do play underwater Scrabble in the bath, or whatever it might take. But it's no need to get complacent. But it's certainly very good news. Do you remember the Marshall Plan?
No, I don't.
No, I don't remember either, because it was a couple of years before my time, but it was after the end of the Second World War. There was a massive amount of aid which was initiated by the USA to bring money and resources over to Europe to recover from the Second World War, and it has been suggested there are increasing calls for there to be a Marshall Plan to get the world going again, and to I mean, we're seeing instances in terms of, for example, what our government's doing and what other individual governments doing, but maybe there's scope for everybody working together to get this licked. The Pope has been tested twice for the virus, and I believe we're reasonably secure in saying that he's okay, and he tends to celebrate his mass now from inside the Vatican rather than go out on the old balcony, but. So he again is availing himself of live stream technologies such as this one. Probably he's got a slightly higher quality one than our home old 10-year-old desktop that we're using here, but so change is coming, and that is a fabulous bit of news. And then, of course, last night, Her Majesty the Queen delivered a very uplifting address to the nation. And did you notice the Vera Lynn reference in that, where she goes, "We will meet again"? And I'm sure that wasn't an accident. It sort of harps back to a very dark time, obviously in her life during the Second World War. But a wonderfully inspiring message from the monarch, and one of only, I think, 4 or 5 times that she has addressed the nation directly in times of crisis, as opposed to the usual Christmas message. In Scotland, apparently. There have been some beaches. No, it's in Australia. I beg your pardon. Scotland, Australia. There's a big difference. It's the difference between kilts and kangaroos, and they both begin with K. Okay, but in Australia, they've closed a lot of the famous beaches on the Gold Coast because people would insist on going down there for a barbie and all that kind of thing. A very good evening to you, Diane. Thank you for joining us on this evening over here, probably afternoon where you are. We're trying to look at the good news about the coronavirus outbreak, and for anybody who's just recently joined us, there is one bit of bad news, which is that our Prime Minister here in the UK, Boris Johnson, within the last 2 hours has been moved from a regular ward in the hospital where he was admitted on Sunday into intensive care. He's still conscious, but there's a chance that he may need to go on ventilators. So regardless of which side of the political fence we're on, we do wish him well at this very difficult time. Good evening also, Lisa and Kevin. Thank you for joining us tonight. And so, moving down this, we're kind of trying to report all the good stuff to keep our spirits lifted and to be happy and upbeat and all this kind of thing. And we've got some quite nice things going on in the world that it's lovely to reflect on. So. Another good thing that's going to come out of this, and I think I mentioned this the other day as well, is that the World Health Organization in February of 2018 were talking about the risks facing mankind right now, and they mentioned disease X. And I believe, Dan, that your day job was a medical professional, so you'll be with me on this one. And disease X was a theoretical danger facing mankind on the basis of something that's a really nasty thing, a sort of lurgy that you'd catch by coughing, that would have a very high mortality rate. Perhaps it would have a very long incubation period. So a nasty thing that could spread around the globe very quickly. A big, horrible pandemic, of which this is relatively mild compared to that one, because it looks like the death rates for COVID are less than 1%, possibly as low as 0.6%, because a lot of the people who get it are asymptomatic. They don't have any symptoms, so they're walking around out there, and so if we knew the true numbers, it wouldn't be as bad as the tabloids paint. But suppose we had some really nasty lurgy which would kill 50% of people, 60% of people, or something like that, as contagious as some of the worst things, but as contagious as flu, but as deadly as something like Ebola, which isn't that contagious. If we had something like that, it would just sweep through the world and wipe out huge swathes of people. And despite the fact that we had swine flu, the research and the willingness to find to put in some coordinated work so that when pandemics come we can squash them very quickly, the will to do that disappeared. And we were happy to practice war games and all kinds of things, or we'd sort of run scenarios of comets hitting the world and everything. But these things are much less likely than pandemics. Pandemics do come round, and we need to be ready and prepared for them. In the US, I believe they closed all the projects. Well, now let's hope they open them again. Let's hope that the financial damage that will be done by this, there will be financial damage. Rich people will hurt after this because it was something that wasn't planned. It was something that just came from nowhere. Let's hope that a bit of money will be spent now to make sure that the next thing is contained, because it might be much more dangerous than this one, and prepared, forewarned is forearmed.
Yep, that's correct. So let's hopefully we have learned a lesson, a huge wake-up call for all humanity in terms of health and wealth is concerned. Not only there are people dying, but it's also there are businesses, economy, and everything dying. The good thing is that we keep the spirit together in a very in a huge solidarity situation amongst all.
Absolutely. And very good evening to both the Kevins. Kevin Darby joined us a while ago, but Kevin O'Brien's joined us now. Coming back to this thing about squashing this thing, an exemplary case of this is Hong Kong and Taiwan. They both suffered from SARS, so they ramped up their precautions, and they haven't been damaged as badly by this current one as might otherwise have been the case, which is very heartening news.
Mm-hmm. That's right. So I wonder how if we have any plans for what is going to be our future after all this is over.
Yeah, it'll be...
Are you making any plans in how to go forward? Have you made any kind of priorities in life? Friends, family, plans together?
Will it be a very different world that we emerge into?
Oh, definitely. A new world, a new economy also.
I think
we're going to go for more localized produce, and the footprint definitely is going to be reduced enormously. Even flying abroad. I mean, many people that I spoke to, they're planning to have their holidays in the UK.
Yeah.
Because we don't know. This could go 2 years, 3 years before it gets under control. Hopefully, a vaccine will be found very soon.
Yes.
And
yes.
And we get back to some form of normality.
And the way in which our economy works, it was in the 1980s they came up with this just-in-time thing where it was the Computer Firm Compaq. I wonder what happened to them. But anyway, they asked all their suppliers to be very close to their factory, and so they didn't have to hold any stocks anymore. And they just said to the suppliers, deliver us 100,000 widgets tomorrow, and the suppliers would have to jump to it if they wanted to keep the contract. Now, that's become a whole sort of global thing, and so our supermarkets apparently don't have in the whole chain any more than 2 or 3 days worth of stuff, which is why the loo rolls ran out, and we've got a big barricade of ours behind the front door to stop germs getting in, but goodness only knows what everybody else did with them, which is quite insane. I hope they're not making breathing masks with them, because that would be very unsavoury, especially, and just let's not go there. Perhaps, even though it might, having these global supply chains and these big container ships and all this kind of thing, if there's some big global problem, it's suddenly very vulnerable. So maybe with Brexit, our supermarkets here in the UK had to do a heck of a lot of work in order to keep, especially since the date for Brexit was changing. It was on, it was off, and they were stockpiling stuff just before Christmas or just before Easter or this time or that time, that must have rattled them a bit, but this must have rattled them hugely, because suddenly these kind of force majeure events, these so-called acts of God, can bring the whole thing crashing down, and a supermarket's job is to clear those shelves as quickly as they can, which they have been able to be doing recently, but also you need to fill them as quickly as possible as well, because otherwise you're not making any money, which is what it's all about. So perhaps supermarkets will now start sourcing more stuff locally, and trading off the slightly extra sort of profit margin with the continuity and certainty of maybe their shareholders will actually demand it, that moving forward. And I think that'll be a fantastic thing to go into the shop and buy some apples that were grown just down the road and this kind of thing, and that would certainly protect us to a huge degree from the sort of shopping uncertainty that we're seeing. We sometimes have to, we're not stockpiling or hoarding, but to do our weekly shop, sometimes we have to go to 3 or even 4 local supermarkets, because this one doesn't have apples and that one doesn't have loo paper and that one doesn't have anything, and there's no way of knowing without sort of turning up and going around one at a time, keeping distant from everybody else.
That's right.
So all the pharmaceuticals and all the drug firms, virologists and everything are working flat out on all this, and these guys need a round of applause just as much as the NHS.
That's correct.
To be honest, because they will. The NHS is treading water, if you like, and enduring terribly harsh and difficult conditions, but the clever bods are the only people who can bring this to an end, and the slightly clever bods like us are staying at home, so we're doing our bit. We can't do more.
Yeah.
But that will help to keep the numbers down. But if we're still here in 12 years' time doing this daily thing, which we're going to do every day until this outbreak, we have pledged to do this every day until the thing promised. We should get sponsors and give the money to the NHS or something. We'll have to think about that. We should do something more to contribute to the general good in terms of what we're doing here. There's a lady who has become the record that we had yesterday of the oldest person to survive coronavirus has been beaten. So the current record holder of somebody who got this virus and got better is a lady called Ada Zanuso. She survived the Spanish flu against all the odds as a child, and she has survived this one as well. She is 104 years old, and she is in India. And the doctors have used a cocktail of drugs to treat her, and it looks like, in much the same way as HIV and some of these other things, that cocktails of drugs are going to be the ways to fight it. So she's been given a combination of drugs designed to fight HIV, swine flu, and malaria. So that's whacking it with everything we've got. And she has recovered. And meanwhile, in Japan and in China, there have been quite encouraging results from treating patients with blood plasma from people who've recovered from coronavirus. So there are lots of very clever things. The testing is getting better, so that we will know faster who's got it. And then once we've all stayed home for a bit, the emerging cases of this, if we're testing enough people, will be spotted quite quickly, and then we'll just isolate all the people that met them, and that'll be much better than having 56 million people sitting in the living room here with Irma and myself. It gets a bit crowded,
Yes, it does.
but thankfully those 56 million people are all using lots of soap now, so the air here is very fresh.
Yes, well, we need to do our little bit and our big bit for humanity. And I was looking at this, David, in terms of this is Sharon Peake, which is a coach and a occupational psychologist.
Yes.
Now, she was talking about challenges. And then she says that when we face with life challenges, there are three situations: accept, change, or leave. So with this coronavirus, we can't do either. We cannot accept it, or can we? You think we can accept it?
No, I don't think that's something we should do. We should always challenge adversity
Yes,
and
that's
fight
right.
it.
So the best way to do it is by focusing on what we have around us. At the time in which you need to make a stock about your home, family, work, and well-being, relationships, adventure, money, and friends. We have to conglomerate everything in one pot, and just pick the ones that are gonna make us feel better day by day.
Yes, those are very wise words, and that's very sound advice. And I think I agree with you that that's.
Yeah, that's my takeaway, because sometimes in terms of life and what we expect of life has completely changed, and nothing is what we used to. Everything has just changed radically within the last 3 weeks, and it's difficult, it's challenging, it challenges our own personality, our behaviors with ourselves and with others. How? Because instead of having the 9 to 5 work and having to get up at 6 o'clock in the morning, get ready, do your exercise and meditation or whatever you do, and then go to work, then to come back, all that has completely been trashed out of the window. So now we really need to understand how we work and how we can make it work facing our current reality with our families, with our beloved ones, and but mainly with ourselves. So it is a time for rediscovery, to reset the button, and I keep it's like a recharge our circle of our well-being.
Yes,
And
absolutely.
the people around that.
Absolutely. Now, hands up who watched that virtual Grand National on Saturday.
I missed it.
We both forgot it. But anyway, the good news is that it raised £2.6 million for the NHS, because bookmakers donated the profits from losing bets to the NHS, which was fabulous. And the 18-1 contestant Potter's Corner was the one that won this simulated Grand National, with all the winners from history going around this virtual. I can't tell the difference between virtual computer games now and real ones. Not at my age, and when we visit our son and he's got a footy match on the telly, I go, is that Chelsea? Then he goes, no, that's a game on the computer. And I'm going, oops. So it was so much better when there was this game of ping, which was just a little dot that used to go up and down the screen, and I could relate to that.
Definitely. Now, I'm just reading about this one, become a joy detective.
Ooh.
So what are the things around you in your home that make you joyful? You have to look for them. You have to become your own detective of your own home and find that joy.
Back in the day, there was actually a detective show on the telly called Lovejoy, I seem to remember.
Oh.
From many years ago. I think it was that he was the one that was an antique dealer, but I was a bit hazy about all that sort of stuff. From many moons ago.
Yeah, apparently if you find it, you have to surround yourself with small pleasures.
It's a terrific idea.
You have to adopt a morning gratitude practice. Schedule a weekly joy date. That's a good one. That's a good to have. You can make some nice dinner.
We should do
dinner.
that. We should
Candlelight.
do that.
Candlelight
Yep, I
dinner.
made a good one today.
Oh yes, you did.
I know some Polish things called kluski, which are like sort of meatballs in kind of a sort of doughy kind of exterior, and of course they all burst in the saucepan because I don't think I did it quite right. But it's the thought that counts. I put lots of jalapenos on them, and then that covered that.
Yep, definitely. You're a very good cook in that one. Thank you very much. Right. So, do we have any news in terms of the Prime Minister?
Oh, there's people doing stuff at home. Here's a fella who is cycling the Tour de France in his one-bedroom flat. So I think that's absolutely a wonderful thing. He's because of health and safety, he's doing it on an exercise bike. Although I would have made him, dress up and go around the living room, but to avoid crashing into the sofa, he is aiming to do 2,200 miles on his exercise bike before the lockdown is over. We'll probably be doing that going up and down the stairs, to simulate Ben Nevis. And his target is to raise £5,000 for charity, and he's raising money for the big issue sellers who can't sell the magazine due to the ongoing pandemic and the fact there's nobody around, and those guys will really be hit hard by this because that is their source of income. I remember interviewing a fellow called John Bird, who started this on the radio a few years ago. It's a wonderful charity, and when things unlock again, if ever we see these people, and they are all around us, it's a good thing to buy their magazine.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I wonder if anybody's planting vegetables. I think one of my friend, a friend, Fiona, I think she just started a vegetable garden.
Oh, well, that's good. That's good. So by the time the lockdown ends, she'll have had 15 harvests of annual produce. Yeah. So that's terrific.
We need to go and get some carrots from there.
We certainly do.
Mm.
Celebrities are continuing to help out. There's a fellow called Tom Kerridge. I don't know who all these celebrity chefs are, but apparently he is one. And it's probably as well known as Jamie Oliver, I don't know. But he's raised more than £100,000 in 48 hours to fund free meals for NHS workers and other vulnerable people in local communities, which is absolutely fabulous. So they're going to provide 600 meals a day for 6 weeks for NHS workers. But now that they've raised more money than they thought, they're expanding it to 1,000 meals a day, and it won't just be for 6 weeks, it will go on for longer. So kind of everybody's pulling out all the stops and doing their bit, which I think is wonderful.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm, that's right. Yes, it is, and it's a very good time also to reflect upon what we're going to be doing going forward in terms of our relationship. There are going to be lots of couples, lots of families out there that feel the strain of having every single member of the family in one house, under one roof, which is good. That's what it used to be in the olden days, and communities thrive and went along and just moved on. In our case, it's a new thing for us because we were used to rush around and school hour and take kids to school, got to work, got picking up at school, come and cook dinner, and just rush. So I think it's time for now to reflect upon, yes, we are rushing 110% every single hour as family with the commitments that we have with our families due to this lockdown. But then it'll be a time for perhaps once you put the children to sleep, or the teenagers have gone to their own bedrooms to do their own thing with playing all this computer stuff, to plan a holiday perhaps going forward, a little time of the couples to be together and really enjoy some kind of solitude and rediscover yourselves. It's a kind of combining the stress that we are putting into our relationships because we are not used to this. This is a brand new environment altogether that we need to nurture in terms of a community as a bunch under one roof, but then find those two key elements that makes a home, which is a husband and wife or the couple, and just allocate some time after all this is finished to be together and just to remember this crazy time of the lockdown.
Yes, this will be told to our children and our children's children for eons. Now, my very good friend Kevin, who masquerades as Rocker Kev on Tuesday nights when he's a fabulous supporter to my weekly rock show, which is tomorrow night at about this time. So do listen up for that. We'll be on a bit earlier tomorrow to comment on that. He sent me this
7 o'clock.
Fabulous story. Well, yes, he sent me this 7 o'clock UK time. He sent me this fabulous story about, I mean, never mind climbing Ben Nevis or something, or cycling the Tour de France. Here is a fella who is a husband of somebody who's a frontline NHS worker. This is according to the Daily Mail newspaper. And he has climbed the height of Mount Everest in his 3-story semi-detached home. Great, 3 stories. And for the sake of authenticity, because it's cold up on Everest, you wouldn't believe this. You couldn't make this up. He strapped a bag of frozen peas to his leg.
Oh God.
And he said it was the hardest thing he's ever done. I'm not sure whether it was strapping the bag of peas or climbing up and down the stairs, but he's climbed the equivalent of 8,850 metres vertically. I don't know whether the descent counted as well, because in that case he'd have gone up and he'd have gone down.
Yeah, I wonder what happened to the peas. Did they eat them afterwards?
Well, I don't know. And also, I'm wondering how he got down. Did he
Probably not.
abseil down at each time, or this story hasn't been elaborated, but he did the challenge to raise money for something called the Trussell Trust. The Trussell Trust, I can't say that, and that supports food banks all across the UK. But what a wonderful and wonderful sort of happy story. So it's so nice to. So very nice to hear of kind of small, quirky, kind of very English type things that are going on at this very difficult and challenging time. Very good evening, Grzegorz Yakshamash. It's very nice to have you. I hope that you and Anna and the kids are doing very well. And Brian, hey, the morning radio DJ who's into the old country music. Very nice to have you join us. I think for the first time in these daily lives that we're doing to celebrate the sort of positive side of the corona crisis. It's great to have you with us. And have you got anything in the old thing there, Irma?
Well, I'd like to just, for those executives that happen to be stuck at home working and having all these Zoom meetings and probably looking forward to get back to normal reality of their offices, not in brackets. There is an article on the Harvard Business Review, and it says cracking the code of sustained collaboration, and basically what it's telling you that going forward, and it's to teach people to listen, not to talk when you're holding these kind of meetings. That all too often when others talking, we are getting ready to speak instead of listening, and the tendency only gets worse as we climb the corporate ladder. So teach yourself and to listen more and talk less, and obviously so on and so forth, and then train your people to practice empathy. It is very important, more so after being stuck in our homes with our families in the lockdown and with all the emotions that go through this lockdown process that we're going through in order to help others. We need to practice some empathy, even at the corporate level. That's something that's going to happen. It's going to change. It's a huge, huge revolution coming. It's not just suits and orders. It's empathy. Feedback. They need to feel comfortable giving you feedback, and you have to be comfortable to. You need to teach them. If you are a good leader, you need to teach them how to lead, and you need to learn how to follow. Or we all have to lean and follow. We need to speak with clarity. I should learn that by heart. English not being my first language, I do apologize, but here we go. I'm doing my best. We need to train people to have win-win interactions. In every single negotiation that we perform in our daily lives has to be a win-win for everybody. Otherwise, you're losing it. So that's my little snippet from the Harvard Business Review that I wanted to share.
That's terrific. That's terrific. It's super advice, and these are the kind of little nuggets that we've got time to reflect on. We've got time to think about all this stuff and take stuff on board while we have. Because one opportunity that comes out of these very grim times is the opportunity to take life lessons, to take them on board, and to move forward with them. And if you've just joined us this evening, you may not have heard the news that the British Prime Minister Boris Johnson has been moved into an intensive care ward in a hospital. He was admitted on Sunday for tests, but his condition has deteriorated. He's still conscious, but within the last 2 hours, he was moved into an ICU ward. So we, regardless of whichever side of the political fence we sit on, that's irrelevant at times like these, and we wish him very well at all these very difficult times.
This is kind of a war against the tiny virus, which is a minute particle. But seeing the Prime Minister Boris Johnson undergoing this huge battle, perhaps my romantic memory or mind makes me think about the times of the night in which the king was in front. And this time it is not that the case, but it's our leader, whether we like it or not. We all, or the majority, put him into place, and he's facing this huge battle. Yes,
very much so. Very much so. Now we're going to be talking. Yeah, last night actually we were going to be talking. We ran out of time. We're going to be talking about the difficulties of facing people in relationships at these particular times. And I think we did talk about this Radio 1 DJ, and I'm very old, so I didn't even know who he was, but it's called Greg James, and he's probably the morning DJ or something. But how he found this couple who'd after 1 or 2 dates or something, they met on Tinder, they had to move in together or not. And they did, and it all worked out well for them. But there are a lot of stories from the sort of online dating world which are kind of feel good and upbeat and that kind of thing. People are learning how to have their dates at a distance, shouting across from one balcony to another. So there's a wonderful story in a publication called 1843 magazine about a guy called Julio who's got his dinner table set for one, and then his Tinder date appears on the iPhone screen, and they sort of have a date. Via the internet, with each having a table. And there was a similar case, wasn't there, in America recently, where this guy flew his drone down to the lady that he saw on a rooftop, not that far away, and they had a similar kind of date where she was on the roof with a table and a bottle of wine, and he had a similar thing at his place, and so love will out, but it's kind of it's a different kind of different to the usual, but it's nice to see that things go on. You've got, haven't you, some bits and pieces for us there?
Basically, it's one of the questions that I in terms of indulgence, I love chocolate and crisps, and those are my guilty pleasures. But there is one question that we should all ask during this lockdown as well, because food, although there's shortage, we surely have plenty in our homes, including chocolates, crisps and cakes. So how much care do you give to what you put into your body? How are you going to burn it? What would you say?
That's a good one. That's a good one.
Uh-huh. And yeah, that's a very good question that we should ask before indulging ourselves too much. I must say I'm guilty of a chocolate today, and I was just about having another one, but no, I didn't. Mm-hmm.
So here's a very nice story. This story is a month old, so I think we'll have to sort of chase it up to see what happened. But I came across this one this afternoon, and it was a married couple who'd been together for 60 years, and they were trying to communicate through a window. And the husband was trapped inside a care home where he'd been isolated due to 1 or 2 residents there had a virus, and his wife was trying to be near him by coming to the window, and they were talking on opposite sides of the window, which is a very touching, very moving picture. We'll look that up on Google and see if there are any developments on that story. But as I say, that was a month ago in a very fast changing and fast moving world. But so love, even after decades and decades and decades, can still face challenges at such difficult times.
Yeah, that's right. So one game for couples is Chat of Lines.
Oh yeah. And you found this in the attic today.
I found this in the attic. I went to the attic to find some stuff.
So now you know all my secrets.
And found this.
You know where all those things came from, yeah.
100 Chat of Lines. And
so what's your favourite, and which one would have worked for you?
Well, I don't know. Is this the one that you use? It says, hold this book up to reveal the cover. Then, while turning the pages as if you were looking for an appropriate line to use, say, no, not that one. Oh, yeah. Oh, no, hang on. Then throwing the book away, say, oh, the hell with it. My name is David. And I will be honoured if you will let me buy you a drink.
Well, why do you think I had a whole case full of those in the attic? So each one you have to throw away.
I know your secrets. So here are David's secrets uncovered. Chat of Lines. So you can practice that with your wife or girlfriend, or just practice a chat of line just for a joke.
Yes, what the heck. And if you've got a favourite one, do let us know. And we'll let everybody know, and we'll see what's the outcome there. So more coronavirus kind of love stories coming our way at this particular time, which you know, there should. I'm sure there'll be a book called Love in the Time of Corona.
Yeah, Corona babies, Corona
There we are.
divorces.
It's all indeed so, and so, you know, it changes. It just changes by the hour. But I mean, you know, modern love got a bit difficult when there were all these apps to do it, and I don't have a phone like that. But then now it's got even more complicated because you can't even meet the person that you swipe left or right on or whatever it is, and so an extraordinary turn of events, you know, has happened in our world with things, you know. When I was a kid, it always used to be the case that the old people were perceived as quite grumpy, and then so it wasn't like it was in my day. And in fact, to the extent that the comedy troupe Monty Python, who are kind of world famous, really, they did a sketch featuring four Yorkshiremen. I don't know why Yorkshiremen. Obviously, Yorkshiremen have this maybe reputation for complaining. I don't know. I thought that was Scotsman. But anyway, no offence to anybody meant or taken or intended. But that they had this thing where these guys were just complaining about how rough life was in their day. And you know, the guy who says he used to live in a shoebox, his friend will say, shoebox? Luxury. We didn't have a shoebox. We had a crack in the pavement. And this kind of thing. It got worse and worse and worse. And the punchline at the end was, well, you try to tell the young people of today how rough it was, and they'd never believe you, would they? And they're going, no, they wouldn't.
David, remember that story about the guy climbing the stairs with a bag of peas, frozen peas?
Yes.
Kevin has put something in there that says, what
Can
is
you
it?
see it? He said that the hardest part, the man with the peas, not Kevin that is, came on day 3, when he started having an issue with his knee. Yeah, I guess you would, wouldn't you? Really, his long-suffering wife, I mean, and forbearing wife. You know, could you imagine? What would you do if I went up and down Everest? But anyway, his extremely generous, kind-hearted, and tolerant wife suggested strapping a bag of peas to his leg to help. So he climbed for hours with the frozen veg attached to him before having them with egg fried rice for dinner that night. That's the most wonderful. That's the most wonderful story. I'm losing weight here because to minimise our trips to the shop and therefore opportunities to be zapped with this horrible lurgy, we're eating about half as much as normal, aren't we? Really?
Yes, we are.
And so each meal is lasting for 2 days, which also means only half as much cooking. So therefore, that egg fried rice would have to last us about a week, I think. But my weight has gone right down to 69 kilos now. I was 92 kilos just before you met me, luckily.
Well done, well done.
But anyway, that wraps things up for this evening. And thank you so much for your company. It's been a real pleasure and an honour to have you joining us. Kevin appreciates that last thing. And we will be back at a slightly earlier time. We'll try to hit about 7 o'clock UK time, because at 8 o'clock UK time, it's the Rock Show. And I'd be honoured if you join me for that as well. There are no pictures on the Rock Show, sadly, but there's lots of great music. And so that's something that we'll be doing as well after the wrap of tomorrow night's update. Stay safe, stay well,
Stay healthy.
Indeed, lock the front door and don't be tempted to wander off into the sunset, because you know, there's a virus hanging on the end of the sun there, not a rainbow and a pot of gold. So we need to stay home, and let us hope that we'll have some good news tomorrow, both about the continuing decline of this virus and about the health of our Prime Minister here in the UK.
And everybody else, that is.
And everybody else, needless to say, everybody else as well. So thank you. Stay healthy, and we'll see you slightly earlier than usual tomorrow. Thank you so much for your patience with us tonight and for your company.